Frederica Inglewood slid the vellum card marked Miss Inglewood from the lonely table by the windows, exchanged it with a baron's card at the end of the main table, and sat before the footman could stop her. Constance Everleigh's smile did not alter. At a flick of her fingers, Frederica's plate and silver were lifted from the stolen place and carried back across the candle-lit dining room. Before Frederica could turn the humiliation into a joke, Oliver, Duke of Westcliffe, rose with his own dinner and walked through the silence to the little table by the windows. Dozens of guests watched him set down his plate beneath the candle-lit chandeliers. Frederica's plain ivory gown and Oliver's dark evening coat made the breach in the seating impossible to overlook. "I had not noticed how much pleasanter the air is here," he said, shaking out his napkin. Frederica crossed back and sat opposite him. "Is this the punishment for a host? Your Grace, bad seating, followed by self-banishment. If so, I hope dessert is dreadful enough to prolong it." "Your Grace," Constance called from the head of the table, "surely you do not intend to reward such manners?" Oliver's answer remained mild. "A place at my table means very little, Mrs. Everleigh, if Miss Inglewood has no right to choose it." Silk rustled. Frederica studied him. He had not ordered anyone to move her. He had moved himself. "Half the room thinks you eccentric," she murmured, "and the other half thinks you pity me." "I do not pity you. Tell me who arranged the guests." "My stepmother." She put a deaf gentleman on the wrong side of his neighbour, the vicar beside the magistrate. "He is quarrelling with, and two shy ladies together, who now believe they dislike one another." Oliver glanced toward the main table. The vicar was gripping his fish knife like a legal argument. "You see a room quickly. I have had practice from the edges. Then help my aunt with the 3 gatherings still to come. Seating games, the temper of the room. You will be paid, and you may refuse any arrangement meant to humiliate a guest." Frederica had expected charity. Wages stopped the joke on her tongue. "Before I answer, move the gentleman in brown beside the widow near the silver urn. Why, they both breed spaniels. Their families have quarrelled since Michaelmas. Give them a safe subject and pride will lose." Oliver considered her, then altered 2 places with a quiet word to a footman. Before the next course, the pair were laughing over a dog that had once stolen a bishop's glove. Frederica lifted her glass. "So it was not pity. Now I will answer. 3 conditions. I may refuse your arrangement as readily as anyone else's. I am paid even if an evening fails. And Mrs. Everleigh cannot dismiss me. Yes, yes, and no. My aunt will enter the wages in the household accounts tomorrow. You will answer to her and to me. Then we have an agreement, Your Grace." "Oliver," he said, "if we are to quarrel over guest lists for a month, formality may become exhausting." By 10 the next morning, Helena Redmond had Frederica beside her in the morning room with the household book open between them. Helena was Oliver's widowed aunt, sharp-eyed, and plainly relieved to surrender any duty involving 40 people and their grievances. She wrote Frederica's wages beneath the expenses for the house party, sanded the ink, and turned the book so Frederica could read the entry herself. Constance stood near the fireplace. "A paid position will only encourage talk." "Then the talk may at least be accurate," Helena replied. "Miss Inglewood is a gentlewoman assisting me with the Duke's guests. There is nothing irregular in paying her for work we require." Frederica kept her face straight, though delight tugged at the corners of her mouth. The figure in the book was not a fortune. It did not need to be. For the first time since her father's death, usefulness had a value that did not depend upon Constance's approval or upon Frederica being amusing enough to earn her place at supper. She touched the edge of the page. "And if His Grace and I disagree," Helena looked over her spectacles, "then I advise you both to argue before the soup is served." That afternoon's luncheon became precisely such an argument. Frederica stood in the drawing room with the seating plan spread across a writing table and tapped 2 names with her quill. Mr. Sterling beside Mr. Finch. Oliver leaned over the paper. The scent of bergamot and clean linen came with him distracting enough that Frederica resented it on principle. Sterling is pompous. Finch is an amateur antiquarian who will dispute the age of his own boots if given encouragement. Together they will exhaust the table. You are thinking like a diplomat. I am wounded. You want peace. Mr. Sterling does not. He is bored. Give him a worthy opponent and he will be too occupied to torment everyone else. Frederica turned her head and found Oliver nearer than she had expected. Neither of them moved. I wager a pudding. Done. 2 hours later, Sterling and Finch were bent toward one another over the luncheon table, disputing whether a Roman coin found in a neighboring field could possibly be genuine. Their voices rose, their hands flew, neither paid the smallest attention to anyone else. Around them, conversation loosened, as if someone had opened a window. Frederica passed Oliver near the mantel with a stack of fresh napkins. Plum pudding, she murmured. His hand rose to cover the beginning of a laugh. You are intolerable. And correct. He recovered his point that afternoon on the lawn. A shy young widow had stationed herself near a game of battledore and shuttlecock, smiling whenever someone looked her way and edging nearer the terrace door whenever they did not. Frederica seized a spare battledore. I can draw her into the game. Oliver caught the handle before she could move. No. Frederica narrowed her eyes. Is this fear of losing another pudding? Look at her shoulders. The widow's shoulders were drawn tight beneath her shawl. Her gaze did not follow the shuttlecock or the laughter. It kept returning to the path where the carriages waited beyond the trees. She wants to leave, Frederica said, and cannot think of a graceful reason. Oliver murmured to a footman. A moment later the man approached the widow with a quiet message about a question from her coachman. Relief changed her whole face. She excused herself, thanked the nearest lady, and escaped without anyone having to notice that she had needed escaping. Oliver returned to Frederica. Plum pudding, I believe. She surrendered the battledore. You are a menace to honest wagering. But the jest came a heartbeat late. He had seen something she had missed. He had not dragged the widow into comfort or made her grateful for his notice. He had altered the room just enough for her to choose her own exit. That precision pulled at Frederica more sharply than rank broad shoulders or the annoyingly pleasant scent of bergamot had any right to do. Over the next 3 weeks, work at Westcliffe acquired a rhythm Frederica had never known. Mornings brought lists and little disputes. Afternoons brought guests who arrived too early or stayed too late. Evenings required music cards, games, and the quiet rescue of conversations that had begun to founder. Yet not every hour demanded that Frederica sparkle. That was the strangest luxury of all. Some evenings she sat near the drawing-room fire changing the rules of a game while Oliver received late callers. He did not glance toward her as if waiting to be entertained. If she was silent, she was allowed to be silent. If she laughed, the laugh belonged to her. Their private contest continued all the same. Frederica kept a tally on the back of an old seating list, a mark for every guest she placed more successfully than Oliver, a mark for every awkward exit he managed better than she would have done. Oliver discovered the tally on the 4th day and added in his own hand, Duke 2. Miss Inglewood a disputed 1.5. She circled the half until the paper nearly tore. Late 1, Tuesday evening. Helena endured 3 rounds of a new after-supper game in the estate kitchen before declaring herself too old to be made ridiculous for the sake of hospitality. The cook remained at the far end of the room shaping pastry for the morning, while Frederica and Oliver stood among the wreckage of the rehearsal counters, set out of order. Folded slips of paper, empty glasses, a wooden spoon pressed into service as a scepter, and one chair facing the wrong way, because Oliver had insisted a truly difficult guest would refuse to sit properly. Frederica pointed the spoon at him. You will play Lord Harrington once more. You dislike the company, the game, and probably the existence of chairs. Oliver had set his evening coat across the back of a stool. I do not have to act very hard. Harrington considers breathing a frivolous occupation. Excellent. The game requires you to name 3 things you would take on a ship. I would not go on a ship. Ships are damp. The rules demand a ship. Then I buy it and order it to remain in dry dock. You cannot purchase your way out of every difficulty. Oliver looked around at the disorder she had created. A remarkable accusation from the woman who has moved half my furniture in the name of amusement. Frederica suppressed a laugh. The furniture was complacent. The furniture was innocent. The furniture was badly arranged. The cook glanced over. Both of them became grave at once. When she turned back to her pastry, Oliver quietly began restoring the kitchen table. He gathered the empty glasses into a tray and straightened the abandoned chair. Frederica stared. You may leave those. I caused half the disorder. You are a duke. An argument you employ only when it assists you. It assists me now. If cook discovers his grace clearing her kitchen, she may blame me for overturning the natural order. The natural order survived the chair. Frederica set down the spoon and began collecting the folded slips. For several minutes they worked without teasing. Oliver stacked the small dishes. Frederica returned the counters to their box. Once they both reached for the same folded cloth. Their hands stopped an inch apart. Oliver looked at her. No audience was waiting for a jest. No game required another objection. The kitchen held only the quiet scrape of china at the far table. The low fire and the awareness that he was standing near enough for Frederica to see the small crease at the corner of his mouth, where his polished composure usually hid amusement. You are not making an objection, she said softly. I am considering one. To the cloth. To your habit of turning every room upside down and insisting it is improved. And your verdict. His gaze remained on hers. Not every room. The answer had none of the brilliance either usually demanded. That was why it struck harder. Frederica took the cloth. Oliver let her have it. They finished putting the kitchen to rights, side by side, shoulder occasionally brushing shoulder. When the cook glanced over again, the table was almost respectable. Severe trial, Frederica murmured. Oliver lowered his voice. Your game, you. His eyes warmed. And have I passed? I have not yet decided. It was absurd quiet, and more intimate than any compliment he could have offered in a ballroom. Frederica had spent years making other people laugh because laughter made her useful. This felt different. No one was deciding whether she could stay. No one was measuring her gratitude. She wanted the next foolish argument because it would be his, and the next silence because neither of them would have to fill it. That realization frightened her enough that she stole the wooden spoon from his hand and informed him he was still losing on points. The pleasure did not make Constance less observant. By the following week, a woman who had asked Frederica's advice about a card table no longer included her in a tea invitation, and 2 gentlemen lowered their voices when she passed. A paid gentlewoman who made the Duke laugh was becoming a subject for gossip. Frederica treated the whispers as she treated most discomfort. She made a joke first. The trouble was that the jokes grew brighter as the whispers grew colder. An hour before the musical evening, Oliver found her in the small anteroom where she was sorting programs. His manner was so carefully pleasant that alarm pricked beneath her ribs. I have spoken with Mrs. Everleigh, he said. Frederica set one program atop another. My condolences. His mouth almost moved, then did not. She has agreed to discourage the gossip among the matrons. In return, I said you would remain behind the musicians during the opening hour. You can still direct the order of the evening. You simply need not be quite so visible until the talk settles. Frederica stared at him. There it was, not Constance's cold smile, not a place card at a lonely table, but the same instruction, wearing better clothes. You want me to hide. I want the room to settle. At my expense. Only for an hour. Frederica gave a small laugh. It sounded wrong even to her. How generous. I am permitted to exist again before supper. Oliver's expression tightened. That is not what I mean. No, it is merely what you arranged. She returned to the programs, because if she looked at him any longer, anger might become something far more humiliating. He had carried his dinner across a room for her. He had paid her because he saw what she could do, and still when enough people became uncomfortable, he had decided she was the easiest person to make smaller. During the opening music, Frederica stayed where he had asked. She counted entrances. She corrected the order of 2 songs. She smiled at a footman who nearly dropped a tray. With every minute, the smile grew sharper. By the time someone proposed, Sherard's restraint felt less like dignity and more like surrender. Frederica walked into the center of the room. I shall perform a relation, she announced, the invisible sort. A few people laughed before she had begun. Encouraged, she made a show of folding herself smaller whenever an imaginary important person approached. She bowed to empty chairs. She moved aside for people who were not there. She smiled with exaggerated sweetness, agreeing with every invisible command. The laughter became louder. For several breathless moments it felt like victory. If she made the absurdity ridiculous enough, perhaps the shame would belong to the room instead of to her. Then she turned. Near the piano stood Miss Bates, a young companion in a grey gown. Frederica had noticed her before, always half a pace behind the lady she served, always quick to move when someone with more consequence approached. Miss Bates's face had gone scarlet. 2 guests were looking from Frederica to the girl and laughing. The blood drained from Frederica's own face. She had meant to mock herself. The room had chosen a safer target. Her hands dropped. The next joke vanished. Frederica left the drawing room so quickly that the door struck the wall behind her. In the dark passage, she pressed both palms against the cool paneling. Her first instinct was still to find a clever sentence, something about dying of bad charades, perhaps anything that would make the moment smaller. The door opened. Oliver came out. I thought a joke would make it hurt less, Frederica said before he could speak. Her voice shook, which annoyed her almost as much as the tears she refused to permit. I thought if I made the whole room laugh, it would not matter that you had asked me to disappear. Oliver went very still. I asked you to make yourself smaller so that I could keep everyone else comfortable, he said. No polished excuse followed it. I made you the price of my peace. The arrangement ends now. Frederica looked at him. He glanced toward the closed drawing-room door, and Miss Bates did not deserve what happened in there. No, the word came out flat. She did not. Oliver began Frederica. That part is mine. She pushed away from the wall before courage could turn itself into another jest. When Frederica re-entered the drawing-room, the laughter had thinned into the ugly murmur that follows a joke everyone wishes someone else had made. Miss Bates remained near the piano. Frederica crossed the carpet to her. Miss Bates, my performance was cruel in a way I did not intend and should have foreseen. I was angry with someone else. I made you bear part of it. I am sorry. The girl searched her face. Frederica did not smile to soften the apology. After a moment, Miss Bates gave a small nod. Thank you, Miss Inglewood. That was all. It was enough. Frederica had barely stepped aside when Oliver approached Constance. He did not summon the room to attention. He simply chose a place where the 2 households most invested in Constance's opinion could hear him. Mrs. Everleigh, he said, courteous as ever, our earlier understanding is withdrawn. Miss Inglewood will not be hidden in my house to preserve anyone's invitation. Those who find that unacceptable are free to decide whether they wish to remain. Constance's face went pale with anger. One gentleman objected in a low voice. A matron demanded her cloak. Oliver gave the servants the necessary instruction and made no argument to detain them. 2 households left before the next piece of music began. Frederica watched their departure from beside the piano. The cost was real. She could see it in the sudden gaps among the chairs, and in Helena's brief, assessing glance toward Oliver. Oliver did not look pleased with himself. He simply returned to the work of the evening. For the next 3 days, the easy banter did not return. On the second morning, Oliver met Frederica in the West Passage with a revised guest list. He stopped 2 paces away, bowed as if she were a visiting stranger, and offered the paper without letting their fingers meet. "Miss Inglewood, Your Grace." The courtesy was flawless. Frederica carried the list away, colder than if he had quarreled with her. Apology alone could not restore trust. He had bartered her visibility for quiet. She had turned anger into collateral harm. The next test came 3 days later during preparations for the final masquerade. Frederica was in the servants' passage when she discovered that Constance had again altered the supper instructions. A footman had been told to move the wine service. 2 maids had received different orders about the second course. The cook, who had no interest in family warfare, informed Frederica that she would obey whichever gentlewoman could manage to give 1 set of directions. Frederica nearly laughed. The old answer rose at once: march upstairs, make a scene, turn Constance's interference into a joke sharp enough to win. Instead, she folded the supper list, went to Oliver's study, and shut the door behind her. "I need 1 thing from you." Oliver laid down his pen. "Keep Mrs. Everleigh out of the servants' passage until the second course. I can manage the supper. I cannot manage it while she changes my directions behind me." "Until the second course," he said. "Nothing more." "Precisely." There was no flourish to the agreement. Oliver did not offer to dismiss Constance from the house, and Frederica did not pretend she could solve the problem without using the authority available to her. For the next hour, whenever Constance approached the lower corridor, Oliver found some faultlessly courteous reason she was required upstairs. A guest who needed presenting an elderly lady who wished to consult the hostess a question about the card room. He never came down to inspect Frederica's work. Frederica noticed that absence more than she would have noticed praise. The first course went out on time. Then the second. The footmen moved in one direction because they had heard 1 set of instructions. The kitchen bell rang. Dishes disappeared up the stairs. No one had to glance over a shoulder to discover whose order would be reversed next. When the second course was served, Oliver's promise ended exactly where he had said it would. Constance was free to go where she pleased. By then, Frederica no longer needed the corridor guarded. She slipped into a small alcove near the gallery and leaned her head against the wall. Oliver found her there a few minutes later, but stopped at a respectful distance. The service was flawless. Nearly. One source made a bid for independence. "I shall have it questioned in the morning." Frederica smiled, despite herself. "Thank you for keeping her upstairs. I am beginning to suspect that 1 promise kept is better than 3 compromises." The smile faded, but not from hurt. Frederica looked at him. "I do not need a duke to arrange every room so that no one dislikes me. I know. I want 1 room in which I am not required to look over my shoulder to see who is preparing to move my chair." Oliver's expression lost its practiced ease. "And I would like someday to be in such a room with you when neither of us is working." That landed more quietly than a declaration would have done. Frederica looked toward the gallery doors, where servants were already carrying away empty glasses. "You may have to survive tomorrow night first. I have survived your games, barely. And the ship never left dry dock. Then I remain optimistic." The old banter had returned, but changed. It no longer covered what had happened. It rested beside it. The final masquerade began with music in the gallery, and Constance whispering in the anteroom. Frederica heard the rumor before she saw its author. According to Constance, the invitation that admitted Frederica to Westcliffe had belonged to a cousin in London. Frederica had stolen it, attached herself to the house party, accepted wages, only to make her designs upon the Duke look respectable, and now intended to stand in the receiving line as if she belonged there. It was nonsense arranged with just enough propriety to sound dangerous. Frederica stood behind the archway in her pale gown, a simple black half-mask in one hand. On a side table lay spare cards for last-minute corrections. Her first impulse arrived bright and ridiculous. She took one up and wrote in large letters, "Miss Inglewood hereby invites herself." For 1 second she could already hear the laugh. Then she saw Miss Bates in her mind, the scarlet face, the room choosing the easier target, the joke becoming larger than the truth. Frederica tore the blank card in half. When Lady Danvers approached Oliver near the gallery doors, several matrons gathered behind her. "Your Grace, we were promised a respectable evening. If Miss Inglewood is permitted to receive your guests after forcing her way into this house, my family and others will require our carriages." Oliver's expression became very still. Frederica knew that stillness now. Once it had meant he was searching for a sentence broad enough to shelter every side. He looked toward her. Frederica stepped from the shadow but stopped short of the receiving line. "Keep the doorway," she said quietly. "I will decide whether I cross it." Something in his face settled. Oliver turned back to Lady Danvers. His voice remained courteous. What disappeared was the middle road. "Westcliffe Park will receive its guests through Miss Inglewood and me. She is employed here, she is invited here, and she has my confidence in the conduct of this evening. Any household that prefers to depart will have its carriage brought without delay. No one need remain under hospitality they cannot accept." He did not call Constance a liar. He did not bargain. He gave the room a choice, and left the choice where it belonged. Lady Danvers stared at him, as if courtesy had become an insult. "Then I shall go." Oliver bowed. "I am sorry to lose your company." A servant was sent for her carriage. An older couple followed. The front doors opened. Cold air crossed the hall. Moments later, carriage wheels ground over gravel outside. One matron stayed from curiosity. Another lingered to see whether the Duke would retreat. He did not. The departures left a visible gap near the doors. Oliver did not fill it with apology. The orchestra began to tune again. Frederica tied the black ribbons of her mask behind her head. This time, no one moved her. No one summoned her. Oliver had opened the doorway and then done the hardest thing a powerful man could do with an open doorway, nothing. Frederica crossed it herself. Helena stood a little beyond the receiving line, composed and watchful. Frederica took her place beside Oliver. From her pocket she drew the old vellum card marked Miss Inglewood, the card that had once assigned her to the solitary table by the windows, and set it on the silver salver beside the receiving list. She untied the mask. Its ribbon brushed her hair, and cool air touched her cheeks as it fell into her hand. "I am told I stole an invitation," she said. Conversation thinned. Even the violins quieted. "I did not." Frederica allowed one beat of silence. "I did, however, once steal a chair. His Grace can confirm that the chair survived." Laughter moved through the gallery, surprised rather than cruel. Oliver's mouth twitched. Frederica did not hide behind the laughter this time. "I have been paid to help arrange these gatherings. I was invited to this house. I have no intention of apologizing for standing in a room I helped make hospitable." No speech followed. No demand for agreement. Miss Bates caught her eye from the gallery and gave one small nod. Frederica returned it. She turned to the next arrival with a composed smile. "Welcome to Westcliffe, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Finch has been waiting by the punch bowl and has found a new Roman coin to disapprove of." Mr. Sterling brightened at once. "Has he indeed?" He went in. Another guest followed. Then another. Oliver did not repeat Frederica's words or announce that he had granted her a place. He simply received the households beside her, as though the arrangement required no further defense. For the next half hour he was repeatedly drawn back toward the entrance. Lady Danvers's carriage had to be brought, an elderly guest required help with a step, and late arrivals needed greeting. Frederica caught herself wondering once whether his public choice had been nothing more than duty performed well. Then the butler murmured that the receiving line might be changed now that the offended guests had gone. Oliver refused. He glanced toward Frederica, not for permission, but to include her in the next arrival. The doubt passed. Constance appeared at the edge of the receiving line after the last late guests had entered. Her expression had recovered its composure, which was almost more formidable than anger. "You have made yourself conspicuous enough for one evening," she said under her breath. Once Frederica would have answered with a barb sharp enough to make the nearest guest laugh. This time she merely looked toward the card-room doors. "Then we are agreed on one point, Mrs. Everleigh. Neither of us shall choose the other's place again. The card-room is within." For the first time that month, Constance had no place to assign her. She inclined her head by the smallest degree and walked on. Constance withdrew to this card-room with two friends. Several guests lingered through the first dance, only to see whether the scandal would worsen. When it did not, supper and music slowly reclaimed the room. A few remained stiff with Frederica. By 2 in the morning, laughter had swallowed the last sharp whisper. The room Frederica had once entered by stealing a chair now worked around her without requiring her to perform for permission to remain. Hours later, when the musicians had packed their instruments and the last carriage lamps were moving down the drive, Frederica stood by the tall gallery windows. The candles had burned low. Her feet ached. Her mask hung from 2 fingers. Oliver came to stand a few feet away. "The room is empty," he said. Frederica glanced toward the servants gathering abandoned glasses. "Not quite. Near enough that I am no longer obliged to be charming. That must be a severe trial. I have faced worse." There was a ship. The excitement of the evening was ebbing, leaving her strangely calm. Oliver looked toward the door through which Lady Danvers had departed. "I could ask you to stay." Frederica touched the lapel of his coat with 2 fingers. "Not tonight. You are still the host, and I am still the woman you employed to help with the evening. I do not want to discover what either of us wants while duty is standing in the room with us. It is not duty." "I know." She smiled. "That is why I want breakfast." His gaze sharpened. "Tomorrow. The small breakfast room. No masks, no guests, no one to impress." Oliver took her hand and brushed his thumb once across her knuckles. "I shall attempt to survive until morning, provided you do not alter my place before I arrive. I make no promises." The next morning, sunlight lay across the small breakfast room. There were no place cards. Frederica had not come there first. She had gone to Helena. Before breakfast, Frederica said, standing beside the same household book in which her first wages had been entered, "I should like to settle the winter." Helena's brows rose, but she asked no foolish question about Oliver. The winter place remained hers if she wanted it paid work assisting Helena with calls, smaller dinners. Guest arrangements and the ordinary social burdens Frederica had already proved she could manage. The wages did not depend upon the Duke's courtship. Helena would also give her a written reference for the 3 gatherings if Frederica later chose another household. Frederica accepted. Only when Helena had sanded the new entry did the tightness beneath Frederica's ribs ease. If Oliver ever wounded her confidence again, she wanted the power to leave Westcliffe without begging Constance for a roof or Oliver for mercy. Affection meant more when departure remained possible. She would not walk into breakfast because she had nowhere else to go. She would walk in because she wished to. That was the choice she had been trying to win from the beginning. When Frederica finally entered the breakfast room, Oliver was not yet there. She chose the chair near the window. For weeks that side of a room had meant exile. This morning she chose it because the sun reached the tea there. The door opened. Oliver entered in a simple morning coat, his hair still damp at the temples. He looked at the empty chairs, then at Frederica. He touched none of them. Frederica hooked one foot around the chair opposite and pushed it out. "You may sit," she said, lifting her teacup, "if you are prepared to lose the final argument of the season." Oliver came over and sat. What are the terms? Frederica pointed to the plate between them. One currant bun remains. I organized this entire month. Plain justice says it is mine. I am the Duke. The plate, the table, and the estate are mine. Your argument is weak. She snatched the plate as he reached for it. Tyrant. Thief. We established your habits on the first evening. I stole a chair, not a bun. An alarming progression. Frederica broke the bun in half and held one piece across the table. Oliver eyed it. A diplomatic settlement, do not ruin generosity by naming it. He took the half from her fingers. Diplomacy is frequently misunderstood. So are dukes and rebellious assistants. Frederica bit into her share. You may continue misunderstanding me at breakfast. His smile came slowly, without an audience to receive it. I had hoped you might say that. Outside the estate was waking wheels in the yard, a distant bell from the servants' corridor, a door closing somewhere below. Ordinary sounds. No one in the breakfast room turned to see who had been seated where. Frederica looked at the old place card she had set aside after the masquerade. She had considered bringing it to breakfast for the joke and had left it in her room instead. She no longer needed it. For once, neither of them had arranged the room for anyone else. Frederica had chosen the light, chosen the chair, and chosen the man across from her. Then Oliver reached for the larger half of the bun on her plate, and she slapped his fingers away. Some choices, she decided, required constant defense. The end.